the way it currently stands, forced labor, slavery takes precedence over rehabilitation and public safety.
Oh, by the way, while the Biden administration gives reparations to everyone but free people, look at the billions he has run over to Ukraine.
We don't have black grocery stores because if you think about it now, just to get in that supply chain, it's almost unheard of.
They don't want the truth to get out. Okay? I don't want to know what my family did or what all these people did and all this stuff like that. Okay?
Come on.
You read that 500-page report.
There's this thing called white superiority and black inferiority. That mindset allows all of the behaviors that we've seen across generations, allows for the construction of these policies and practices and systems and structures that continue to oppress us. This is not a handout. This is a debt that is owed.
You know, Allensworth was like the internet of his time in 1904, 1905.
The total black population in California is about 2.6 million, and then of that, the descendants compose about 2.2 million of that. So California, with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, can absolutely afford to satisfy the international terms for reparations, beginning with compensation.
Any financial obstacle that exists that impedes the success of increasing financial prosperity needs to be dealt with and eliminated.
No matter where we've been, no matter what part of this fight we've been in, we've been harmed, and we've had harm done to us specifically.
When I got to Los Angeles, this was some of the worst segregation I'd ever seen. And remember, I'm telling you, I'm from Mississippi.
Because as you can see, I'm giving you broken history right now, you know? But I had to give it to you guys today. I said, no, I got to show them this because it's so precious and nobody really knows about it.
Black people don't have that kind of luxury. Our historically black communities have been redistricted multiple times.
Now listen, if you can't handle the TR roof, don't tune in.
Write your thoughts, dreams, and affirmations into existence with this powerful, practical reparations manifestation planner. Put 2023 plans into action with purpose.
The proofs are hot off the press and look fire, fam. Perfect planner to write reparations manifestations and any other New Year's resolutions, goals, and achievable aspirations. It's been stated, if you want to hide something from a black person, put it in a book or write it down. Let's break those stereotypical trash tropes.
Conjure our justice claim collectively in 2023. Believe it and achieve it. Cut the check. Reparations Now Planner. Available now at Amazon.com. Write it into existence this year with fam and friends.
All right. So we are at it again. AB 3121 Consolidated Preliminary Report. Marathon read right here on the Mass Media Group. Started reading February 13th, 2023 at 8:30 p.m. PST. Today is February 15th, Black History Month, American Freedmen History Month 2023. So let's get started. All right. Section M, increase efforts to restore the voting rights of formerly incarcerated persons. This proposal overlaps with the proposal in the enslavement chapter. This proposal recommends that the legislature take steps within its authority to increase efforts to restore the voting rights of returning citizens who have completed their terms or are on parole by increasing access to voter registration and polling precincts. Legislation could require the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, CDRC, to affirmatively provide individuals being released from prison with voter registration information. The California Department of Justice recently issued 2 information bulletins that relate to the voting rights of persons with a criminal history. One information bulletin was sent to all local law enforcement agencies in California, detailing the categories of incarcerated individuals who are eligible to vote and those who are not eligible to vote. Incarcerated individuals in California who are not eligible to vote are those serving time in state prison, federal prison, or are in county jail under prison terms conditions. Proposition 17 was approved in November 2020 and amended the California Constitution to permit people on parole for felony convictions the right to vote in California. Another information bulletin was sent to all county probation departments in California to ensure access to voting for eligible persons who are under the supervision of probation departments. This proposal further recommends that the CDRC and Secretary of State receive funding to facilitate voting in correctional settings by either establishing polling sites within correctional facilities or providing access to mail-in voting while incarcerated, consistent with eligibility. Housing segregation and unjust property takings. This section details the policy proposals to address the harms set forth in Chapter 5, Housing Segregation, of the interim report. All right, just a real quick second. I just want to make sure that my volume is okay, and then I will continue. Okay, let's see if my volume's okay. My volume looks good here. All right, everything looks good. All right. Okay, here we go. Prioritize responsible development and environmental health in communities and housing development. Enact policies overhauling the housing industrial complex. Expand grant funding to community-based organizations to increase home ownership. Provide property tax relief to increase home ownership, provide direct financial assistance to increase home ownership, require state review and approval of residential land use ordinances by municipalities with high levels of segregation, repeal crime-free housing policies, increase affordable housing for Black Americans, restitution for racial motivated takings, providing funding to assist Black Californians with making residential home ownership a reality. Prioritize responsible development and environmental health in communities and housing development. Enact statewide responsible development standards to require new developments to enhance the surrounding contributing resources, i.e. prioritize a medical facility instead of a coffee shop, improve overall environmental quality, and advance climate justice. Amend Senate Bill SB 1000 to require local governments to identify red line communities within their jurisdiction and make plans to increase tree canopy coverage and access green space. This will limit pollution exposure, ameliorate heat island effects, and improve air quality in redline communities. Adapt redlined communities to a changing climate by utilizing existing programs and funding from the California Strategic Growth Council to develop local climate resilience hubs in redline communities. Climate resilience hubs are community-driven facilities that support residents, facilitate communication, distribute aid, and provide an opportunity for communities to become more self-sustaining during climate emergencies. Ensure investments in resilient change infrastructure do not lead to displacement by implementing rent control / stabilization policies at a local level. Developing resilient community infrastructure can lead to increased property values and spur cycles of gentrification that make the now improved communities unaffordable for their original residents. Fund full lead service line replacement on privately owned property. to remove lead in drinking water and ban partial lead service line replacement. Allocate 40% of the federal infrastructure investment and Jobs Act funds received by the state of California for full lead service line replacement directly to disadvantaged or low-income communities and Black communities that were formerly redlined. Restore communities split by highways. Reduce the transportation pollution burden of Black communities by ending highway expansion in areas with high levels of pollution. Policies overhauling the housing industrial complex. Increase enforcement of mandatory acceptance of housing vouchers, i.e. Section 8, etc. For historically redlined zip codes, implement rent caps, not just rent control, and no increase rents for units that are either run down or did not do any improvements, etc. i.e. landlords should get to raise rents unjustifiably on units just because the market rate is increasing. Provide funding for developers, land trusts, and community-based organizations, CBO, for affordable housing operated by or serving descendants. Require disparity studies beforehand to provide justification for such funding. Create wellness centers and green spaces. Redefine what qualifies as affordable housing by readjusting area median income limits for state subsidies. Provide funds for research on land grabs / land displacement, land theft similar to historical preservation. Provide for a private right of action or immediate action against banks, private entities that knowingly, purposefully appraise Black-owned homes at lower values. Compensation for predatory housing industrial complex issues, i.e. those having to pay higher costs on insurance, etc. due to race / contributing factors. Expand first-time home ownership grants and increase funding to community-based organizations and related programs. Discriminatory policies, including redlining, have produced persistent and long-standing housing desegregation and inequities in home ownership in California. Between 1934 and 1962, the federal government had issued $120 billion in home loans, 98% of which went to white people. I'm going to repeat that again. Between 1934 and 1962, the federal government had issued $120 billion in home loans, 98% of which went to white people. Wow. All right. From 1940 to 1960, less than 1% of federal housing authority loans in Northern California went to Black people. Such discrimination has created persisting inequities today. By 2019, Black Californians' home ownership rate was less than in the 1960s, when certain forms of housing discrimination were legal. To address housing discrimination, this proposal recommends providing hyper-local grants or contracts to community-based organizations that focus primarily on providing financial and home ownership assistance to descendants and to African Americans more generally. This recommendation could include specific grant criteria and or changes to existing local ordinances to ensure that community-based organizations rather than government entities, for example, are contract grantees or the recipients of grants. Additionally, this proposal should impose transparency and quality control mechanisms on the grants and contracts, including, for example, reporting requirements to assess whether the funds are being spent as intended. And it should allocate funding for disparity studies of public contracts and grants to community-based organizations seeking to provide financial aid and other assistance to increase home ownership among Black Californians. If this opposition is recommended, such a proposal will likely require the legislature to identify a state agency that will administer the grants, likely the Housing Finance Agency in this context. and it may wish to define eligibility for the recipient non-profit organizations. Provide property tax relief to descendants living in formerly redlined neighborhoods who purchase or construct a new home. To address housing discrimination, this proposal recommends providing property tax relief by allowing descendants who reside in formerly redlined neighborhoods to transfer the assessed value of their primary home to a newly purchased or constructed primary residence. If the task force recommends these property tax cuts as part of housing reparations, the task force may want to consider accompanying proposals that would supplement any public school funding that would be lost from the reduced tax revenue. Such a proposal follows the model of Proposition 19, which provides property tax relief to Californians who are severely disabled, victims of wildfires, or over the age of 55 when purchasing or constructing a new home. Under Proposition 19, such individuals who purchase or construct a new home in California, quote, may transfer the taxable value of their primary residence to a replacement primary residence located anywhere in the state, regardless of the location or value of the replacement primary residence, end quote. Shared appreciation loans and subsidized down payments, mortgages, and homeowners insurance. To address housing discrimination, this proposal recommends providing financial aid to California descendants who reside in formerly redlined neighborhoods to enable them to become homeowners by 1. Providing them shared appreciation loans for the purchase of homes anywhere in the state with subsidized down payments, and 2, subsidizing mortgage payments and homeowners insurance fees. Shared appreciation loans could follow the model of the California Dream for All Shared Appreciation Loan Program, which seeks to increase home ownership among low and moderate income homebuyers generally. Other jurisdictions like the city of Evanston, Illinois, have also offered down payment and mortgage assistance as part of their efforts to enact reparations. An alternative proposal recommends the legislature provide such financial aid, but further limit eligibility to first-time home owners or those who do not currently own a house to maximize home ownership and focus on those most in need. Or the task force could recommend that the legislature provide such financial aid to any California resident who is a descendant, rather than solely to descendants who reside in a formerly redlined area, to broaden the eligible recipients of such aid. Okay, just want to quickly repeat that just so I think I understood what they meant, but I just want to read that again. Okay. An alternative proposal recommends the legislature provide such financial aid, but further limit eligibility to first-time home owners or those who do not currently own a house to maximize home ownership and focus on those most in need. Or the task force could recommend that the legislature provide such financial aid to any California resident who is a descendant, rather than solely to descendants who reside in a formerly redlined area. Okay, got it. To broaden the eligible recipients of such aid. To the extent the state subsidizes down payments on or homeowners insurance, rather than providing the money to eligible Californian, the state should disperse the funds to the closing agent when an applicant closes on a home purchase, to the lender for a mortgage payment, or to the insurance company for a homeowner's insurance payment. Doing so would ensure maximum use of the subsidy to aid homeownership, as otherwise portions of the subsidy would become taxable income. State review and approval of residential land use ordinances enacted by historically and currently segregated cities and counties. Residential zoning ordinances have been used for decades in California to prevent Black families from moving into neighborhoods, maintaining residential segregation. Various laws were used to prevent additional housing from being built effectively shutting out Black Americans. To address local zoning laws that reinforce and recreate housing segregation, this proposal recommends that the state, one, identify California cities and counties that have historically redlined neighborhoods and whose current levels of residential racial segregation fall within a certain statistical level of similarity to the degree of segregation in that city or county when it was redlined. All right. To require those identified cities and counties to submit all residential land use ordinances for review and approval by a state agency, where the agency will reject or require modification of the ordinance if the agency finds that the proposed ordinance will maintain or exacerbate levels of residential racial segregation. And 3, remove the process of additional review and approval for identified cities or counties if the city or county eliminates a certain degree of housing segregation in its geographic territory. Scholars have found that similar efforts by California to increase pressure on localities' residential zoning decisions through state supervisory authority has had some effect. In the early 1990s, about a quarter of California jurisdictions had HCD-approved housing elements in place, whereas today, about 77% of California jurisdictions are compliant. As an alternative to state review and approval of ordinances in the localities described above, the state could adopt a post hoc approach by creating an administrative appeal board to review challenges to developmental permitting decisions or zoning laws, reversing the denial of a development permit if the underlying zoning requirement is deemed to maintain or reinforce residential racial segregation. Repeal crime-free housing policies. Crime-free housing policies have proliferated across California as part of a national trend adopted by landlords and public housing authorities to ban renting to individuals with a criminal history. Incorporate crime-free addendums into their lease agreements to facilitate evictions and evict tenants who allegedly commit crimes or drug-related activities. Alongside crime-free housing policies, municipalities have often adopted chronic nuisance ordinances, which classify certain tenant activities like excessive noise or contact with the local police department as a nuisance and encourage or require landlords to evict tenants who engage in those activities. The result of these policies and ordinances is a disproportionately negative effect on people of color and heightened racial segregation in housing. This policy recommends require jurisdictions to review and modify or repeal any crime-free housing policies that result in disparate impacts or otherwise violate state or federal fair housing laws. Limit the scope of crimes and associations with criminal activity that qualify for eviction. Prohibit landlords from evicting tenants based on any of the following. All right. Let's see. Okay. A previous arrest that did not result in a conviction, participation in, or completion of a diversion or a deferral of judgment program. A conviction that has been judicially dismissed, expunged, voided, invalidated, sealed, vacated, pardoned, or otherwise rendered inoperative, including but not limited to, as is provided under sections 1203.4, 1203.4a, or 1203.41 of the Penal Code, or for which a certificate of rehabilitation has been granted pursuant to Chapter 3.5, commencing with Section 4852.01 of Title VI of Part 3 of the Penal Code. A determination or adjudication in the juvenile justice system or information regarding a matter considered in or processed through the juvenile justice system. Information pertaining to a conviction, if consideration of that conviction would violate Section 12269 of Title II of the California Code of Regulations or any successor to their regulations, as it reads on the date of the application for rental housing accommodations. A conviction that is not directly related to one or more substantial, legitimate, non-discriminatory purposes that support the owner's business interests. In determining whether a criminal conviction is directly related, a practice should include consideration of the nature and severity of the crime and the amount of time that has passed since the criminal conduct occurred. Information pertaining to a conviction that occurred more than 7 years before the date of the convictions, or information indicating that an individual has been questioned, apprehended, taken into custody, or detained or held for investigation by law enforcement, police, military, or prosecutorial agency. Require landlords to use look-back periods and individualized assessments of relevant mitigating factors like post-conviction rental history, nature of underlying conduct, age of the conviction, age at the time of conviction, and general post-conviction record when viewing evictions. Make affordable housing a fundamental right that allows for legal representation in eviction proceedings for the descendant community. Increase affordable housing. Throughout California's history, state and local governments displaced Black residents through various housing policies and prevented them from obtaining access to sufficient funds or credit to purchase a home. As a result, Black Americans are more likely to rent than own their homes and thus own less assets and cultivate less intergenerational wealth. Building out affordable housing in areas of high poverty or high segregation can facilitate racial and economic residential integration. It can also help bridge the racial wealth gap. This proposal recommends increasing affordable housing for Black Americans by requiring housing built pursuant to the Regional Housing Needs Allocation Program, RHNA, to explicitly advance racial equity and address the housing needs of descendants. This policy proposal recommends amending the RHNA in the following ways. Require the RHNA objectives to be implemented in a race-conscious way that includes tangible goals and realistic targets for compliance. Prevent displacement and gentrification. Ensure that the construction of affordable housing is accompanied by adequate renter protections to prevent gentrification and displacement. Require regional councils of government to make funding for new development projects conditional upon protecting existing renters. Enforce RHNA objectives. Withhold funding streams if racial equity goals targets are not met. List the housing needs of Black Americans or the housing needs of formerly redlined communities as a factor to incorporate into RHNA methodology. Restitution for racially motivated takings. The state of California and local governments targeted property owned by African Americans in urban renewal and development projects for unjust uses of eminent domain, often without providing just compensation. As a result, the construction of public infrastructure disproportionately displaced and fractured African American communities. One example of many eminent domain takings is the construction of the Century Freeway in Los Angeles, which dislocated 3,550 families, 117 businesses, and numerous parks, schools, and churches in 1968. Other examples of unjust takings include, but are not limited to, the Freeway 210 construction in Pasadena, construction of the 10 freeway in Santa Monica, construction of Interstate 980 in Oakland, construction of Interstate 5 in San Diego, Burgess family land in Coloma that now compromises the Marshall Gold Discovery State Historic Park, Bruce's Beach in Manhattan Beach, Russell City in Alameda County, the Fillmore District / Western Addition in San Francisco, Sugar Hill in Los Angeles, and Section 14 in Palm Springs. And by the way, interjection, there's actually going to be a lot more where that is coming from in the future as well. So let's get back to it. This proposal recommends the following. Restore state property taken during race-based uses of eminent domain to its original owners, or provide another effective remedy where appropriate, such as restitution or compensation. Create a legislative agency to research and identify California state properties acquired as a result of racially motivated eminent domain. Create a database of property ownership in the state. Review and investigate public complaints from people who claim their property was taken without just compensation. Distribute just compensation for their fair market value, adjusted for property price appreciation of the property at the time of the taking in. Develop and implement a public education campaign regarding the cycle of gentrification, displacement, and exclusion. The connection between redlining and gentrification and the history of discriminatory urban planning in California. Pass Assembly Bill 889 to require beneficial owner transparency for rental properties that are owned by LLCs in order to help complete the database of property ownership. Funding to assist with residential home ownership. This proposal recommends that the state provide funding through grants or otherwise to assist descendants with making residential home ownership a reality. Separate and unequal education. This section details policy proposals to address harms set forth in Chapter 6, Separate and Unequal Education, of the interim report. Increase funding to schools through the local control funding formula to address racial disparities. Fund grants to local educational agencies to address the COVID-19 pandemic's exacerbating impacts on educational disparities. Implement systematic review of school discipline data. Improve access to educational opportunities for all incarcerated people. Adopt mandatory curriculum for teacher credentialing and training for the school personnel and grants for teachers. Employ proven strategies to recruit African American teachers. Require that curriculum at all levels be inclusive and free of bias. Advance the timeline for ethnic studies classes. Adopt a K-12 Black Studies curriculum. Adopt the Freedom School Summer Demonstration Pilot Program. Reduce racial disparities in the STEM fields for African American students. Expand access to career technical education for descendants. Reduce K-12 public school segregation by enabling students to attend schools in other districts. Fund free tuition to California public colleges and universities. Eliminate standardized testing for admission to graduate programs in the University of California and California State University systems. Identify and eliminate racial bias and discrimination in statewide K-12 proficiency assessments. Increase funding to schools through the local control funding formula to address racial disparities. This proposal recommends the legislature provide and direct additional funding to schools in low socioeconomic neighborhoods to address racial disparities in education by adding this category to the existing groups listed in the supplemental grants provision of the local control funding formula, LCFF, and to require the review and revision of the formula every 2 years. This proposed policy would also require the expenditure of supplemental funding be monitored and tracked to ensure that all such funding goes to schools in low socioeconomic neighborhoods and is used exclusively for improvements that directly address educational opportunity gaps for students attending these schools. This proposed policy would also explicitly provide that the funding cannot be used for policing. Additional funding could be provided to the California Department of Justice, DOJ, and or the California Department of Education, CDE, the monitor the expenditure of funds and or enforce if necessary. A 2021 report found that neighborhood poverty rates are highest in segregated communities of color, 21%, 3 times more than in segregated white neighborhoods, 7%. This LCFF does not focus specifically on African American students or require schools to ensure that funds are spent on high need students. At the same time, wealthy and often more predominantly white neighborhoods continue to fund their schools at greater levels, both because a percentage of funding for California schools come from local property taxes and because wealthier communities can easily raise additional funds through donations and local bonds. Fund grants to local educational agencies to address COVID-19 pandemic impacts on education. This proposal recommends the legislature fund the CDE to administer additional COVID-19 relief and school reopening grants to local educational agencies, LEAs, or amend existing grant parameters for current grants administered by CDE as discussed below for the below purposes. As part of receiving funding, LEAs would have to plan for how the following activities would be supported by the budget and identified in the Local Control and Accountability Plan, LCAP, and any grant materials with a requirement to focus on reducing existing racial disparities, focus on restorative practices, implement positive and restorative discipline practices, analyze disciplinary data, shift from zero tolerance approaches, and reconsider and eliminate the presence of police and security in schools. In particular, it is recommended that school districts should take 6 weeks over the summer or at the beginning of the year to focus on restorative practices that address whole child needs. A related proposal for this chapter of the interim report is set forth herein. Address whole child needs, conduct regular wellness screenings and review data on attendance, engagement, and grades to identify and address the individual needs of students at the classroom, school, and district levels. Schools should administer diagnostic assessments and surveys to inform instructional planning, but not to hold students back or to track them, and measure school conditions and climate. Schools could also be existing resources such as the Whole Child Policy Toolkit produced by the Learning Policy Institute. Increase staffing and community-based partnership to address students' individualized learning and mental health needs. On a school, On a school district level, this could include high dosage tutoring and investment in expanded learning opportunities and partnerships with community organizations. School districts could use this funding to provide mental health supports by establishing multidisciplinary teams and process for implementing a comprehensive continuum of supports to further student learning, promote student wellness, and address barriers to learning development. Develop a centralized school or district-wide referral and tracking system for students, teachers, and families to connect to appropriate resources and review the effectiveness of interventions and supports collaboratively and systemically. School districts should increase their staff and work with community partners with an emphasis on hiring and partnering with individuals who demonstrate cultural congruence with the student community to be served. A related proposal for this chapter of the interim report is set forth herein. Advance racial equity in curriculum and teaching, implement culturally responsive teaching curriculums and professional development for teachers that support them in achieving instruction that is equitable, relevant, and rigorous. Professional development for staff should always address trauma-informed and healing-centered practices, restorative justice practices, culturally responsive and anti-racist teaching practices, and other whole child practices. Related proposals for this chapter are set forth herein. 2. Provide additional funding to the CDE to administer grants to organizations and researchers in California to fund further research and data collection efforts in order to assess the full impact of the pandemic on African American students in California. Further research would inform learning recovery in the short term and improve performance and equity in the long term. During the pandemic, African American and Latinx adults disproportionately face increased health risks and economic disruptions, impacting their families and students in particular. Technology barriers further worsen the existing inequality in the educational system. As of summer 2020, nearly a third of teachers in majority African American schools reported that their students lacked the technology necessary for virtual instruction. Only 1 in 5 teachers said the same in schools with fewer than 10% of African American students. The pandemic exacerbated pre-existing disparities in academic growth and access and opportunities for students of color in public schools. In particular, students appear to be falling even farther behind in math and reading. The evidence also shows that the academic growth has been continued to widen for many African American students. See systematic review of school discipline data. This proposal overlaps with a proposal in the Unjust Legal System chapter. This proposal recommends the implementation of a systematic review by CDE of public and private school disciplinary records to determine levels of racial bias, and all schools to implement racially equitable disciplinary practices. This would include requiring every school to collect and review data on an annual basis and issue a public report annually analyzing the disparities in discipline, require every district or county board of education to hire a management level employee to coordinate the public reporting of disparities in each school. That employee will be responsible for failures to report data as required above. Providing funding to CDE and the DOJ for administrative investigations of any schools that have high levels of racial disparities. Providing funding to districts to implement the requirements of the bill, requiring schools to implement racially equitable disciplinary practices using positive behavioral interventions and supports PBIS, and provide state-mandated training on implicit bias, culturally competency, PBIS, and related subject matter to school staff on an annual basis, and reporting on the status of implementation to CDE as part of the Local Control and Accountability Plan, LCAP, or on a more frequent basis. Studies have established that African American students are subjected to disproportionately higher rates of discipline than white students, which results in a number of negative outcomes, including early involvement in the criminal justice system. A study at Princeton University found that African American students experience higher rates of suspension, expulsion, in-school arrests, and law enforcement referrals than white students. Key findings of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights majority are that students of color as a whole, as well as by individual racial group, do not commit more disciplinable offenses than their white peers. But African American students, Latino students, and Native American students in the aggregate receive substantially more school discipline than their white peers and receive harsher and longer punishments than their white peers receive for like offenses. Improved access to educational opportunities for all incarcerated people. This proposal recommends funding for and improve access to educational opportunities for all incarcerated people in both juvenile and correctional facilities. This would include requiring all schools in the University of California and California State University system to join the Second Chance Pell Experimental Sites Initiative if it is expanded beyond the 2022-2023 award year. If it is not expanded beyond the 2022-2023 award year, establish a California state counterpart to this system. Requiring California community colleges and California State University schools to partner with juvenile and adult correctional facilities to offer a specified number of classes per year for a formal educational program, such as a GED, associate degree, or bachelor's degree, and require the CDE to identify, assess, and monitor implementation of further measures needed to ensure the provision of high-quality education in detention settings. A report by the Vera Institute on Second Chance Pell Experimental Sites Initiative documents the positive impacts such by post-secondary education in prison, such as positive self-worth and development, preparing for positive release jobs, and successfully re-entry, public safety inside prisons, and economic savings. These positive impacts also include racial equity, as the VERA report states that post-secondary education is a primary avenue for upward mobility, especially among people of color, who disproportionately make up the prison population. VERA also reports that people who participate in education programs in prison are more likely to be employed after their release and to earn higher wages. The Brookings Institute also has found that post-secondary prison education programs are inextricably linked to advantage racial equity, especially given inequality in K-12 education that feeds low-income African American and Latinx students into the school prison pipeline. Additionally, individuals who enroll in post-secondary education programs are 48% less likely to be incarcerated than those who do not, and the odds of being employed post-release are 12% higher for individuals who participate in any type of correctional education. Adoption of mandatory curriculum for teacher credentialing and training for school personnel and grants for teachers. This proposal recommends the adoption of mandatory curriculum for teacher credentialing and trainings for school personnel that include cultural responsive pedagogy, anti-bias training and restorative practices, and identifying and supporting teachers who provide culturally responsive instruction, and adopting new models for teacher development to improve teacher habits in the classroom by having the CDE issue a request for a proposal for grants to go to teachers and schools to develop models based on best practices and to share examples of success in their proposals. Teachers and schools would then report back to the California State Legislature on any models and outcomes so that they might be scaled up. A review of the statewide requirements of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing website shows that there are no requirements to complete trainings or courses on culturally responsive pedagogy, anti-bias training, or restorative practices prior to receiving a teaching credential. Culturally responsive instruction helps students feel valued and empowered and builds students' sense of belonging and self-confidence. A number of studies on brain science demonstrate that positive relationships in the classroom build motivation, create safe spaces for learning, build new pathways for learning, and improve student behavior. Strategies to recruit African American teachers. This proposal recommends the development of proactive strategies to recruit African American teachers to teach in K-12 schools in California. This would include establishing a program for University of California and California State University teachers credential programs like UC Prime to be focused on teaching in schools that predominantly serve African American students. Funding to establish an intensive teacher preparation support program with ongoing mentorship, tutoring, exam stipends, and job placement services, and providing funding for and creating partnerships with the University of California and California State University teacher credential programs for teacher residency and grow your own programs. All right. At the district level to recruit African American teachers, candidates among high school students, paraprofessionals, and after-school program staff, and providing funding for districts to retain staff and grow your own programs. Studies have established the importance of students having at least one teacher who looks like them. While African American students comprise 4.07% of California's student population, the percentage of African American teachers in California has declined from 5.1% in 1997-98 to 3.9% in 2021 and 2022, or 21-22 through 21-22. African American men comprise only 1% of teachers in California. The costs of teacher preparation programs have been identified as one of the major barriers impeding the pipeline of African American teachers, and experts have noted that the funding of these residency programs show a real focus by the state to remove this barrier. Studies have also found that grow your own teacher programs led to positive outcomes for diverse student populations. All right, requiring curriculum at all levels be inclusive and free of bias. This proposal recommends curriculum at all levels and in all subjects by inclusive, free of bias, and honor the contributions and experiences of all peoples, regardless of ethnicity, race, gender, or sexual orientation, by funding a department or center with appropriate specialty within the University of California or California State University system, review all curriculum, and issue a public report or series of reports to the governor and the California State Legislature on its findings and recommendations for curriculum changes. The United States has been opposition from elected officials to discussing the truth about slavery and critical race theory in public K-12 schools. Opponents contend these subjects divide Americans and place the blame on white Americans for current and historical harm to African Americans and non-white Americans. However, curriculum that includes African American history and experiences is important. Erasure of African American history and dehumanization of African Americans in school textbooks contribute to cultural and social alienation. Additionally, African American students can feel unimportant, invisible, and voiceless in classrooms where they do not see their experiences and history reflected in school curricula. All right, let's see where we're at. All right, so we're pretty close to 9:30. All right, I'm gonna try to see if I could push it through to page 50. See how far we can get. Might go a little bit over time, but wanna see if we can make this goal of 50 pages. Let's do it. Advance the timeline for ethnic study classes. This proposal recommends advancing the timeline for ethnic study classes in public and private schools. Current law requires California high school students to take ethnic studies as a graduation requirement commencing in 2030. Dang, 2030? Shouldn't that be like earlier than that? Okay, anyway, interjection. A peer-reviewed study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that was conducted with San Francisco United School District students found quantitative evidence of a long-term academic impact of ethnic studies. The benefits for students who took an ethnic studies course in 9th grade lasted throughout high school and resulted in higher attendance, higher graduation rates, and increased enrollment in college. EdSource, quoting Thomas D., a professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Education and a co-author of the research, noted that not only did the strikingly large benefits from the course not fade after ninth grade, but the course produced compelling and causally credible evidence of the power to change learning trajectories of the students targeted for the study, those with below average grades in 8th grade. Adopt a K-12 Black Studies curriculum. This proposal recommends adoption of a K-12 Black Studies curriculum that introduces students to concepts of race and racial identity, accurately depicts historic racial inequities and systemic racism, honors African American lives, fully represents contributions of African American people in society, and advances the ideology of Black liberation. The curriculum will be modeled on the approach taken by the St. Francis United School District. It will include University of California's A through G approved courses for high school students and required unit plans for PK through 8 that introduce students to the concept of race, racial identity, African and African American history, equity, and systemic racism. There will be at least 3 A courses, one on African American history, culture, and geographies, one on African diasporic studies, and another on African American history and phases of African American resistance. At least one B course would be focused on classic and modern Africa, African American, and diasporic literature, while at least one G course would be youth driven in curriculum development and implementation. This proposal also establishes a Black Studies Fund with the Instructional Quality Commission to fully fund this ongoing effort, which includes curriculum development, staff to administer the program, and educators to teach the curriculum. The Black Studies Fund staff would also review the original curriculum of the Freedom Schools of Mississippi Summer Project and incorporate this curriculum where appropriate. The proposal also recommends that CDE or another state agency work with SFUSD, the San Francisco State University Africana Studies Department, as well as long-standing organizations such as the NAACP and the Alliance of Black School Educators, a guide design and development of the curriculum. Adopt the Freedom School Summer Demonstration Pilot Program. This proposal recommends adoption of the Freedom School Summer Demonstration Pilot Program, FSSDPP, initially introduced as AB 2498 BONTA in the 2021-2022 regular session of the California State Legislature. As would have been the case under AB 2498, this proposal establishes the FSSDPP under the administration of the Superintendent of Public Instruction to develop summer literacy and learning loss mitigation programs for public school students. These programs would celebrate students and the cultural richness of the diversity of the United States, increasing the reading, writing, and comprehension abilities of students and prevent learning loss during summer recesses. The pilot project would provide funding to 10 LEAs to offer a summer school literacy, enrichment, and learning loss mitigation program for up to 3 years. It would also pair the LEAs with technical support teams that have a track record of offering successful summer school programs. The Assembly Education Committee hearing report on this bill suggests that AB 2498 is modeled on the Children's Defense Fund, CDF, Freedom Schools. Cool. CDF is a nonprofit organization that works to prevent child poverty, abuse, and neglect, and to increase access to health care and education, according to the report. All right, let's see here. According to the report, the CDF Freedom Schools program provides a summer and after-school program model that supports K-12 students and their families by providing and supporting high-quality academic and character-building enrichment, parent and family involvement, all right, here we go. Family involvement, civic engagement and social action, intergenerational servant leadership development in nutrition, health, and mental health. In 2021, the CDF Freedom Schools program served 7,210 students on 152 sites in 75 cities in 26 states and and Washington, D.C. The Education Committee report also contains a number of studies from PACE and the RAND Corporation that support this proposal, namely the effective summer programs can improve academic, behavioral, and social and emotional learning outcomes, reduce racial disparities in the STEM fields for African American students. A study conducted by the Education Trust noted that roughly 2 in 5 African American and Latino students aspire to go to college and name STEM subjects as their favorites. But less than 3% enrolling in STEM courses due to systemic barriers. These include funding inequities, education education lenders, reliance on a student persistence or assumptions about their intelligence, racialized tracking, not receiving the same opportunities as affluent and white students to enroll in advanced STEM courses, and reliance on single denominators of readiness, GPA or test scores. For an example, the Education Trust also issued a set of recommendations for state leaders on how to increase access to and success in advanced coursework for African American students, which are detailed above. The proposal adopts and directly incorporates the recommendations listed in reports published by the Education Trust and Kapor Center. Limited revisions have been made to ensure this proposal is consistent with the other recommendations of the task force. These revisions are identified in correspondence footnotes. Where language has been added, it is identified in italics. Following the recommendations set forth in the Education Trust report, this proposal would enact more equitable enrollment policies and practices, such as requiring districts to use multiple measures to identify students for advanced coursework opportunities, including but not limited to express desire to enroll, exam scores, grades in relevant prerequisite courses, and recommendations from trusted school staff who have taken implicit bias training. Passing automatic enrollment policies for all advanced coursework opportunities K through 12, so that students identified for advanced coursework through any of the measures above are automatically enrolled in advanced coursework opportunities with the option to opt out. Monitoring progress of automatic enrollment to ensure schools are implementing the policy in ways that increase enrollment in advanced courses for historically underserved students, and providing technical support for schools and districts struggling to enroll Black students in advanced coursework opportunities, especially those opportunities that are the foundation for future success, i.e. algebra, or for example, algebra 1 and 2, biology, physics, chemistry. Eliminate long-standing barriers to accessing advanced coursework opportunities by covering the cost of exams, transportation, books, and other required chemistry. Okay. Eliminate long-standing barriers to eliminate long-standing barriers to accessing advanced coursework opportunities by covering the cost of exams, transportation, books, and other required materials for advanced coursework, requiring districts and or schools to notify families about advanced coursework opportunities available in the school and district, the benefits of enrolling in those courses, and the process around how to enroll in the family's home language. 3, providing funding to recruit or train teachers to teach advanced courses, especially in schools serving large concentrations of students of color and students from low-income backgrounds. 3, annually monitor disaggregated data on enrollment in advanced courses by course type and provide technical assistance to districts that are under enrolling students of color in advanced courses. This data should be publicly reported on report cards so that communities have a better understanding of course availability, enrollment, and success in advanced courses. 4, require districts to set and hold themselves accountable for public goals that, within an ambitious number of years, Black students will be fairly represented in access to and success in advanced coursework from elementary through high school. Ensure accountability for public schools that within an ambitious number of years, Black and Latino students and students from low-income families will be fairly representative in access to and success in advanced coursework from elementary through high school. And 6, implement policies to support district and school leaders in creating safe, equitable, and positive learning environments in advanced courses by 1, providing professional development and coaching for educators to create culturally affirming environments. Build relationships with and understanding their students. Support students' academic success and develop anti-racist mindsets. 2, investing in preparing, recruiting, and support teachers and counselors of color, given the research that shows educators of color are more likely to refer students of color for advanced courses. 3, requiring districts and schools to be culturally relevant, anti-racist pedagogy, practices, and curricula, and provide technical assistance and funding for professional development. Supporting engagement with families and members of underserved communities by requiring districts to survey students and families to understand their interests, aspirations, and experiences with school related, especially related to STEM. 5, creating guidance for schools about identifying and partnering with community-based organizations that provide rigorous after-school and or summer enrichment opportunities that expose underserved students to STEM and STEM careers. 7, utilize the Computer Science Strategic Implementation Plan, CSSIP, as a guidance document for expanding access to computer science in California. Increase participation of students from underrepresented backgrounds in CS education, especially Black, Latinx, Native American, rural, low-income, and female students by prioritizing funding and developing initiatives for the most underserved schools and populations, plural. Establish rigorous CS teacher preparation, certification, and professional development for K through 12 teachers. Ensure access to technology infrastructure to support CS education, prioritizing districts and local education agencies, LEAs, with the highest needs. 11, implement K through 12 CS standards with all CS courses and integrated across subjects by providing support for LEAs, administrators, and teachers. 12, develop assessment, data collection, and accountability mechanisms to track the implementation and efficacy of CS education and track equity gaps. Ensure CS is prioritized as a high school graduation and college entry requirement, and implement large-scale policies and initiatives that address systemic education inequity affecting student outcomes across subject areas. Finally, this proposal would additionally provide state funding for districts to obtain the resources necessary to achieve equity of resources across the board, including but not limited to hiring teachers, implementing advanced course offerings, purchasing technology, supplies, and equipment, and waiving the fees to take advanced placement AP exams. All right, so we're going to put a pin in it there, and we'll be starting on, looks like 11 which will be expand access to career technical education for descendants. Sounds like a good one to me. So I'm gonna go ahead, family. Thanks for everyone for joining and listening in. Appreciate your time and energy into this matter. Hopefully we are learning in this process. Do apologize in advance for the first, 13-15 minutes of the first reading on day one. Probably ended up doing that one over, but I know the mix isn't really balanced in there. But I'll probably be doing a couple of pages again in that one. But in the meantime, I want to finish up this proposal and then I'll go back. But yeah, we're currently on page 50. Go ahead, stop sharing my screen here. And yeah, family, this is what we do. This is what we're in it for, right? All right, so once again, this is the AB 3121 Consolidated Preliminary Policy Proposals Marathon Read right here on Amend the Mass Media Group. Once again, this started on February 13, 2023. Today is February 15th, and we're going to be here at 8:30 Monday through Friday, p.m. PST. If you have any suggestions of the sort regarding reparations news or anything else, go ahead and hit us up at amendthemassmediagroup.com or send us an email at etnmediagroup@gmail.com. That's etnmediagroup@gmail.com. And before we go, I just want to give a shout out to my brother Chris Larson, who was in support of our brother Samuel Brown, which we happened to had a building session, as we call it, or for those that don't understand the term building, having conversation. We had an interview today, so it was really good. So shout out to Samuel Brown, shout out to Chris Larson, shout out to Josiah, shout out to Kim Mims, shout out to who else was, can't forget about Darlene, and shout out to the supporter of the bill, and I believe she's the new author of ACA 6, Assembly Member Lori Wilson, I believe is her name. I did have an opportunity to interview as well, so we'll be posting that here on Amend the Mass Media Group, so you'll be able to check that out. But family, you have a wonderful evening, and until then, we'll be talking to you tomorrow. Tomorrow is the 16th, right here on Amend the Mass Media Group at 8:30. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't had a chance, you got to get your planners too, right on Amazon. Get your planners at Amazon. All right, y'all. Until then, peace and reparations. We out.
Write your thoughts, dreams, and affirmations into existence with this powerful, practical reparations manifestation planner. Put 2023 plans into action with purpose.
The proofs are hot off the press and look fire, fam. Perfect planner to write reparations manifestations and any other New Year's resolutions, goals, and achievable aspirations. It's been stated, if you want to hide something from a black person, put it in a book or write it down. Let's break those stereotypical trash tropes.
Conjure our justice claim collectively in 2023. Believe it and achieve it. Cut the check. Reparations Now Planner. Available now at Amazon.com. Write it into existence this year with fam and friends.
The way it currently stands, forced labor, slavery takes precedence over rehabilitation and public safety.
Oh, by the way, while the Biden administration gives reparations to everyone but free people, look at the billions he has run over to Ukraine.
We don't have black grocery stores because if you think about it now, just to get in that supply chain, it's almost unheard of.
They don't want the truth to get out. Okay? I don't want to know what my family did or what all these people did and all this stuff like that. Okay? You read that 500-page report.
There's this thing called white superiority and black inferiority. That mindset allows all of the behaviors that we've seen across generations, allows for the construction of these policies and practices and systems and structures that continue to oppress us. This is not a handout. This is a debt that is owed.
You know, Allensworth was like the internet of his time in 1904, 1905.
The total black population in California is about 2.6 million, and then of that, the descendants compose about 2.2 million of that. So California, with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, can absolutely afford to satisfy the international terms for reparations, beginning with compensation.
Any financial obstacle that exists that impedes the success of increasing financial prosperity needs to be dealt with and eliminated.
No matter where we've been, no matter what part of this fight we've been in, we've been harmed, and we've had harm done to us specifically.
When I got to Los Angeles, this was some of the worst segregation I'd ever seen. And remember, I'm telling you, I'm from Mississippi.
Because as you can see, I'm giving you broken history right now, you know? But I had to give it to you guys today. I said, no, I got to show them this because it's so precious and nobody really knows about it.
Black people don't have that kind of luxury. Our historically black communities have been redistricted multiple times.
Now listen, if you can't handle the TR roof, don't tune in.